So now I'm going to move on to setting up the gimbal. Now there's a couple of different things we need to worry about when we're doing the gimbal setup, and the first thing we've got to do is balance everything. But before we can balance it, everything is critical. So the sensor needs to actually be fixed to the camera housing. The camera needs to be there in the housing, and everything needs to be lined up, or we can't actually do the balancing, because everything affects it. Even the weight of this wire affects the balance of the gimbal. Alright, so the gimbal has to be fully assembled and in a ready to go state before we can start to do the balancing. And again, we do the balancing by three adjustments. Number one is by loosening off this screw and moving this arm in and out, we balance the back motor. But before we do that, we need to balance the front motor. And there's two different ways we balance the front motor. The first of all is these two screws that go into the motor here. We can loosen those off and change the height of this housing. And the other thing we can do, and it's a bit more subtle, is we can actually tilt the camera case backwards and forwards to set the balance as well. Alright, so that changes the balance. This height changes the balance on this motor. And finally, this distance here changes the balance on the back motor. But before we can do that, we need to fit the sensor. And the sensor needs to go as close as possible to on axis of the motors. So what I'm going to do, first step, is I'm just going to sit this here, and I'm going to run a ruler up the center line of this back motor, and with a pencil I'm just going to draw a line down the back of my case. It's a bit hard to see, but it is there. Okay, then I do, and I've got the bolt hole there nicely, is mark another line across the case. So I've got a center point which is but just above a center point for the sensor, which is about 4 millimeters, 3-4 millimeters above this pad, and almost in line with the end of the straight bit of that pad. Alright, so I've got a little trick for making sure we get this sensor in the right spot. The other thing that's critical with the sensor placement is, so what I've done is I've just pulled the back off the GoPro. The other thing that's really important with the center placement, the arrow has to be up, and that's towards the hinge end. Up is the hinged side of the case. Right? And we need to make sure it is perfectly square. If this is angled slightly, then the sensors are going to get skewed data, and we're going to end up with a gimbal that doesn't work well. So we need to get the sensor square, and I have come up with a jig to help me do that. Now all this is these are 12-bit long bits of Lego, and they are 8-bit long bits of Lego. And if you build it like that, right, so double thickness piece that side, single piece thickness that side, that sits perfectly over the back plate of the GoPro. And what we can do is then take another piece, sit that there, and if we look at that, move that a bit further down, just temporarily hold that there, and then look, that actually lines up pretty much with the right width. So then it's just a matter of working out the height to mount the sensor. Alright, and I can tell you that if you line, so if I line the top edge of this piece up with, so that I just cover over the seal at the top there, So you can see the seal through the case. Move it up till I can just not see the seal. That is going to be my sensor almost is very precisely in the correct spot. So now, before I stick it on, just going to give it a squirt of some isopropyl alcohol. Dry that off. We want this thing to stick. I want it to stick well. So, jig in place, lined up with the top. Peel off the sticky on my sensor. Come on. There it is. Okay. Hold it into the corner. Push down. And then we have my sensor perfectly square and nicely lined up. When I clip that back on, very nicely lined up with the two motors. Okay, so to have another sticky at that, what I've done as far as my jig goes, so 12 by 8, and I just got one of those blocks overhanging by one run, and that works a treat as a jig to sight your sensor on the back of your GoPro case. Alright, so now we're ready to start balancing up. I'll come back and show you some of that. So it's a bit hard to show you what I've done here, but basically what I've done is I've gotten the balance right on the gimbal. Now that I've got the wires in, it's a bit tricky to show how that works, because the wires actually do have, if you play with the wires, it does move a bit. But what I did was, firstly, I got the front motor balanced, and to do that, what I found out all I needed to do was basically adjust the tilt on the camera a little. It's a bit hard to see, but basically what I've did was found it was sort of a bit nose heavy. It would always end up face down. When I'd spin it around, it would go back to face down. So I just tilted the camera back a little bit on the pivot. By the way, it's also a bit hard to see, but when you do the top bolt, the bracket, the curved bit of that mount there goes to the front. Alright, so the bolt is to the back, if that makes sense. So all I had to do was just tilt the camera a little bit, and I got to the balance point on the front motor, and I didn't need to actually adjust the back motor at all. That balanced up beautifully. So the 2mm at the back seems to be the magic number to start with. Yours may differ, and yeah, the lining up the motor is definitely the way to go with the motor height, and just a little bit of play around with the angle of the camera really does fine-tune the balance up nicely. Now, one of the things that Quentin includes with, or Multi-rotor includes with the kit, is this little bubble level, which you stick on that top bit. Now, I did fire it up and have a slight problem where I was getting oscillations. And what I found was if I just touched the wire at the back here, near the sensor, the oscillation would stop. So what I've done is I've replaced the foam tape that came from Multi-rotor with some Scotch outdoor tape, which has a little bit less, is a little bit more solid, a little less spongy. I actually talked to Quentin before I did it. He doesn't have the problem with the oscillations, but that's what I adjusted anyway. So in the meantime, I've bolted it into the Delrin mount on the front of my Vampire, which has got the top plate missing just at the moment. I've stuck the PARIS Sirius brushless gimbal controller on the top plate there. The sensor wire and my motor wire I ran through the tube here to bring them out close to this motor. Just makes the wiring a little bit tidier. Left a nice big loop of the wire going in here, and I did use just a little bit of sticky tape just here where it goes through the frame, the sensor wire, just to maintain the loop length. So I've got enough cable that it moves freely in all directions. Likewise with the pitch motor cable and the sensor wires. Now the roll motor connects to M1, the pitch motor connects to M2, sensor wire plugs in. You don't have to worry about this remote control loom. And in fact, it's probably not going to ship with these wires on it. Right, let's see if I can move a bit closer for you. It's probably not going to ship with this full loom. It's going to probably ship, talking to Quentin, with just this one lead. And that will be your pitch override channel. Okay, so you'll be able to hook that up to an output on your receiver and use a control off your radio to change the pitch angle or override the pitch angle point. I'm not going to go through how to set that up because that'll vary from radio to radio. So you can plug it into channel 8. Now, all the PIDs and everything are set. It is ready to go, but it is all configured around a 4S battery. If you try and run anything less than a 4S battery in this, it won't work. So here, I'm going to power it up for you. Okay, I've set it to level. Got a bubble level on it, why not? Plug in the power, and it will go through its little startup. This LED's blinking, and it seems to have just a little bit of a shake at the beginning while it sets itself up, and that's it. It is working. So if I pick this up, bingo, it's working. Smooth, buttery, wonderful. Now the reason it's working, and it's working so well, is that I took the time and really played. I've spent about an hour playing with all the different mounting positions for the camera, getting everything lined up, everything balanced, everything right. If you don't do that, it isn't going to work. Another thing you need to be aware of is you can't go pushing the buttons on the camera once the gimbal's active. You can't pull the camera in and out once the gimbal's active. So you're going to have to come up with a pre-flight check system of popping your camera in, turning your camera on, starting record. I don't recommend you use the remote control when you're actually flying, but some people do. And then once the camera's good to go, then powering up the gimbal. Now when I'm finished, this will wire into the leads coming off my Voltaire. I'll plug that into channel 8 on my receiver for my pitch override. And hey presto, one beautifully working brushless gimbal. I am so pleased with it, I can't say. It is just been easy to build, little tricky to get set up as far as mechanically goes, but there you go. I'm sure there'll be lots of tweaks and charging and lots of other stuff. Once I get some more information on what the rest of these leads do, I'll do an advanced video on what you can do with the rest of the loom. And in the meantime, I'll catch you guys on the forum. Bye.